Good evening, this is Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight it is the single biggest story that is confronting this country, the state of the economy. Growth is at a 3-year low at 5.7%, something even the most die-hard supporters of the government say is too low and needs to be fixed. And where are the jobs? That is the key question for most folks, as new data shows that creation of jobs has also shown a sharp decline. Many economists believe a combination of demonetisation and the GST implementation has only added to the problem. Others don't think that demonetisation was such a big factor. Just last week, former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha went public with scathing criticism of the way the economy is being handled. He says he doesn't believe it will be fixed by 2019, in time for the next general election. Well, how can the economy be fixed? Joining us on the program tonight, a man who has worn many hats, former Union Minister in the previous NDA government, a former editor and economist, Arun Shourie. Mr. Shourie, thank you for coming in this evening. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Let me first ask you about the overall state of the economy. The growth rate is at 5.7%, which even Arun Jaitley was forced to admit was something of a concern to him. How worried are you when you look at the numbers? Do you think it can turn around soon?
No, of course, you see, it is, as Mr. Yashwant Sinha pointed out and Mr. Chidambaram has been pointing out, 5.7 really means 3.7 on the old series. So even this figure is, is a figure for complacency that the government has manufactured. And I certainly feel it's not just the figure; it is that the policies which ought to be implemented and ought to be implemented well, like GST, are being completely fumbled. You're fumbling with the ball all the time. And you were saying that some people still think about demonetization, that it was not such a bad thing and so on, or that it's not contributed to this. Actually, in my view, as we had talked at that time, it has been the largest ever anywhere money laundering scheme, entirely conceived by the government, entirely implemented by the government, entirely acclaimed by the government.
You're saying demonetization is a money laundering scheme?
Money laundering scheme, because everybody who had black money has converted it into white through the banks, by the government. So what else was it? And when you see figures that the small and medium enterprises on the Reserve Bank's survey show that the sales have dropped by 58%. They are the largest, they are the persons, everybody has been saying they are the ones that have been hit the most. And the Reserve Bank survey also says of the 726 firms that they surveyed, that their earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation, etc., have fallen by 122%. So that's not relatable to demonetization.
So you think demonetization has been the single biggest contributor to this?
Yes, it has been one of the biggest idiotic jolts.
Idiotic jolts.
Because if there were, let's say, a war, and you are fighting a righteous war, and that dislocates the economy, okay, no problem. But yahan to apne bas kulhadi marna hai.
So let me ask you though, that there are those, for instance, on the GST implementation who say that this was expected, there was upheaval that was expected because you had a new tax regime coming into place, and it will sort itself out in a matter of a month or two. You don't think so?
Nidhi, even cancer, you have spontaneous remission sometimes. That does not, that's no what you call, no good shit to the government. After all, many people had been warning that this is a very poorly conceived GST. My friend Arvind Datar, the lawyer, he had been writing again and again, he had been advising the government on this. Similarly, it was, can you imagine a situation in which the rules are amended within 3 months 7 times? And you can't even count the number of notifications. And each time the thing is amended, the whole software has to be changed. And if you ask the Infosys people in private, they will tell you that it is at the 11th hour we were told what the shape of this thing is going to be. Is that the way to implement a reform? And it is the poor fellows, they have to fill in 36 forms a year.
Is GST bad or its implementation bad, according to you?
No, of course, GST, everybody would say that India should be a common market.
It's how we've done it.
It's how we have done it, and the great acclaim. This event management of GST is one of the things which is causing the problems.
What do you mean by that, when you say event management of GST?
Yeah, look at it. I mean, it's a tax reform. To put a tax reform at par with the independence of India. That is a tryst with destiny, second tryst, midnight session of parliament, a tax reform. That is vulgar. Event management carried to the point of vulgarity. So, idea, naturally everybody says you should have a common market, and in a sense the country has been moving step by step towards these things, towards rationalization, towards cooperation with the states, and you suddenly hurry up a pregnancy.
But Mr. Shourie, there are those economists who argue, even now, that as far as structural reforms are concerned, whether it's on infrastructure and other reforms, that the Modi government has done more in the last 3 years than previous governments have done for many years, and that these are temporary blips in the horizon. Do you think that there is any truth in that?
Yes. So let us take some examples, specific examples.
On infrastructure, for example.
Well, it's a continuation of the reforms that were taking place. For instance, the private-public partnership was or was not working, and Mr. Gadkari has attended to the flaws in that partnership and said, okay, now we will tweak this in this way. I mean, isn't that the normal job of a government? That's just the normal job. If for that also you require wah-wah, it's a very strange concept of government.
So are you actually worried about, like Yashwant Sinha said in his column, he doesn't believe things will be okay by 2019. I mean, we're looking at that because of the general election, but do you agree with that? Do you think that it will be a very long-term slowdown in the economy?
Well, we don't know about those things, but the problem is not about the economy, because it can be buffeted by many matters. For instance, a good rainfall or a poor rainfall. The question is about policies and their implementation. I don't think that is going to change, because those flow from the character of this government, and that is the problem.
Which is what, according to you? What is the biggest problem in the character?
No, I think one feature, of course, is that there is a government of 2.5 persons. Modi, Amit Shah, and one sort of in-house lawyer who probably gets a brief every morning कि भाई आज इसको defend करना है, कल उसको deflect करना है, and that's what he spends his day doing. That's the government. They don't have the expertise, and they have surrounded themselves by persons who do not have the expertise. So therefore, they are now in a very sort of sealed echo chamber of just 2.5 persons. They don't hear what is going on. After all, the distress of which the Reserve Bank has now documented of the small and medium enterprises, those poor fellows have been shouting and clamoring for a long time. Nobody heard them. But अब मोहन जी ने कह दिया,
अब तो सुनना पड़ेगा.
अब तो सुनना पड़ेगा. So immediately government says, yes, now we will tweak it. Maybe we will get one rate.Maybe we will do something special for this, that and the other. Is that the way a government functions?
I'm going to come to that in a little more detail, but let me ask you, Mr. Yashwant Sinha spoke out last week and he said, I would be failing in my national duty if I did not speak up. Now, you have spoken on the economy, I think, after many weeks. You haven't, many months, in fact. BJP sources at that time, just last week, really attacked Mr. Sinha and you. They said, Arun Shourie and Yashwant Sinha are criticizing us out of frustration. Yeah. And I see that's brought a smile to your face. But how would you sort of look at that criticism?
This is their standard operating procedure. When they are confronted by inconvenient facts, they try to bury them in an avalanche of abuse. So, I have a constructive suggestion in this. They should actually publish a list in advance of the persons who are frustrated. At least we will then know whose views we may not spend time in trying to study. It is always a retrospective appellation. तब उनको याद आता नहीं यार वो तो frustrated आदमी है. तो जो चुप बैठे हैं हम कहें कि भाई वो तो frightened आदमी है. So is that the way to discuss things? The question is that Yashwant Sinha, Chidambaram, every economist, they have been talking about the facts. Those facts emerge from official reports of the Economic Survey. Finance Ministry publishes it. The Reserve Bank of India surveys.
Or the SBI's report.
SBI's report. So, all this is to be discounted.
You know, when you talk about this,
and we can go through. I mean, are what is being said based on facts or not? Is it a fact or not that the GDP has collapsed to 3.7% according to the old series? Is it a fact or not that the index of industrial production has gone down from about 9% in 2015-16 to now about 1.7% in April to July? That is not, the manufacturing has gone down to that. And in July, it was 0.1% growth. That is not a matter of concern. Bad loans. Do you know, when in March 2014, when the government came into office, and I had alerted Mr. Modi personally to this growing problem, because Uday Kotak and all had been speaking about it. And at that time, the bad loans were 2.5 lakhs. Today, along with these restructured, so-called restructured loans, which are really bad loans, they are 12 lakhs. At that time, they were about 7 to 8% of total outstandings. Now they are 17% as an underestimate. So, are you not going to be worried about those things?
But Mr. Shourie, let me ask you, we actually saw growth beginning to slow down before demonetization was announced. That's when you could see that there was a decline. And then, of course, we've seen a sharp decline after that. Why do you think the Prime Minister went in for demonetization, if that was the case?
Because if I may recall what we had talked of earlier, this is government by ilham, by revelation. रात को ilham आता है, किसी ने कह दिया, अरे demonetization. And Nidhi comes and says, in any case, it was a bold step. So I had to remind you that suicide is a bold step, jumping into a well is a bold step. But those are the arguments. Which argument today survives? Black money, all of it turned into white. Terrorism, you are just now having a report of terrorists keep coming in. Naxalite financing. So which is the rationalization which they kept shifting every week? In the end, they had nothing to say. And look at the...
They say they benefited politically, which they did in Uttar Pradesh.
So you mean to say you are going to finish 86% of the currency of the country to benefit politically? That's your sense of responsibility?
But when you
How
talk
strange. Then please talk about your political stratagems, not about economic policy.
When you talk about the echo chambers, okay, Amit Shah has called the slow growth of the economy as a technical issue. What did you think about that?
Yes, who said it?
Amit Shah, the BJP president.
That famous economist. Technical issue. Last time he said, "Arey, ignore the Prime Minister's solemn promise." वो तो जुमला था. Now he says, ignore official figures. They are just official figures, technical चीजें हैं. Actually, he's half right. It is a technical matter, and the technical matter actually works the other way. The exaggerated notions that we have been fed about the growth rate of 8%, 7.5%, they are the technical matter because of the new series.
So you're saying it's the other way around?
No, yes, and I'll tell you the proof of that. If you please go back to when the new series was introduced, they said, the department said, the government said, I think they said in Parliament also, I'm not sure about that, but they certainly said that we will redo the old years, the earlier years, by the new method of calculation and present the results in just a few months. A few years have gone by and they have not presented those, because if they did that, it would show that the earlier rates were even higher. So that itself shows that yes, Amit Shah is right. It is a technical matter.